iPad has become pro with M1, so what does iPadOS need to do at WWDC to keep up with the power it provides? This and more in today's iCave. I'm iCaveDave and I simplify Apple so that everything just works for you, and if you want the latest Apple news, leaks and rumours every weekday at 12 UTC, like this video, subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell so you don't miss a thing. First up, Apple's earning reports overview, then AirPods Production cut, iPadOS changes, and we'll round out the show by answering your questions in iCave Answers, so let's do this. Apple yesterday announced financial results for its fiscal 2021 second quarter, which ended on March the 27th, 2021. The company posted a March quarter record revenue of $89.6 billion, up 54% year on year, and quarterly earnings per diluted share of $1.40. International sales accounted for 67% of this quarter's revenue. That was the official statement that opened Apple's press release on this, but getting more into the weeds on it, Macs have had their best 3 quarters in a row for the past 3 quarters ever, and Mac revenue itself was up 66% just this quarter. The investor call itself was in general pretty uneventful, apart from a couple of notes about upcoming supply constraints on both Mac and iPad, but interestingly the Apple stock price actually went up after the event in after-hours trading, which usually doesn't happen for these investor calls, even when Apple absolutely smashes all the expectations. AirPods production has been cut by 25 to 30%. Nikkei Asia is reporting that Apple's cut their AirPods production due to lower than expected demand, but still sold over 72 million pairs last year alone. This reduction is to help reduce stock holding, which is currently thought to be quite high, but also comes ahead of the AirPods 3rd generation refresh that is slated to come later in 2021, with a new design and possibly spatial audio coming to the base model, but with the active noise cancellation remaining an AirPods Pro feature for now. Making iPadOS Pro. Obviously, we've talked a lot about the iPad Pro with M1, which goes on sale tomorrow and will be shipping to consumers middle of March, we believe. Now that all this power is available in the M1, does iPadOS need to make some changes in order to keep up? I think they do, and we've got one of our questions from iCave Answers that was relevant to this, so I'm going to pop that one in here, and then we'll get on to some more of your comments.
Team Kinetics asks, iCave Answers, thanks for your thoughts on iPadOS. For me, what's needed is an improved file management system, being able to use files from external storage, and better external monitor support, the latter of which we know is coming. Pro apps is more down to the third-party developers, in my use case Adobe and their Creative Suite.
So that comment in particular kind of rounded up a lot of what everyone was saying, but I've kind of distilled it down. Apologies that I've not kind of included everyone's comments here because it just would have taken forever, but the big kind of headline items that everyone seems to want is better file management. If Apple was to bring a version of Finder to the iPad, that would probably solve a lot of the problems. Also, being able to do things like putting a downloads folder into the dock like we have on macOS, that would be really helpful too, because right now if you use the downloads function in Safari, it goes into your iCave drive, which you then have to go into files to find it and then work out which app can open it, and it's a mess right now. So I definitely agree on that one. Another big item that people have asked for is cross-browser support with other rendering engines, not just WebKit. And that does make sense because especially if you were doing, say, web development on an iPad, you kind of need to be able to use Chrome with its own engine. Because right now, if you use Chrome on an iPad or on an iPhone, it uses the WebKit engine, not Chrome's own engine. So that means that things that you develop might look different. Now, an iPad would actually be a decent solution for developing websites, especially for things like WordPress and kind of the CMS based stuff, but you do need to see how they're going to render in other browsers too. And people also want to have those browsers have dev tools and inspectors so that they can look more at the code behind it, the CSS code, the HTML code, PHP, etc., and see how things are working, and also if something's not working in a page, maybe be able to identify what's wrong. Better multi-monitor support. Now, some people have suggested that this should be more like Samsung's DeX, where when you dock your phone to either a laptop chassis or to an external display, it gives you basically a desktop experience instead of what they have on the phone, but obviously still using the same apps, the same internal storage and all that sort of thing. Now, I don't see Apple quite doing it that way, but I do think because we've now got Thunderbolt, Apple is probably going to optimize what you can do with an external display and possibly hubs that can kind of be like a desk dock, if you like, for your iPad. My concern, as always, is if you do want to use external displays and you want to have it as an extended desktop, you've either got to have a touchscreen monitor to be able to interact with stuff, or you've got to use a keyboard and trackpad or mouse. and that kind of takes away from why you would be using the iPad in the first place. Although I do understand a lot of people would want to have an iPad that they can use as a tablet on the go, and then dock it to use it more like a desktop when they're at a desk. That makes all the sense in the world. My concern is that you wouldn't really be able to use the external displays unless you've also got that keyboard mouse experience. Then third-party App Store or web-downloaded apps. Now, I definitely think this is unlikely because this is literally what Apple is fighting in court with Epic and some of the others at the moment, so I really don't think that they are going to give you the option of downloading apps from the internet onto an iPad. I don't think that takes away from it being a computer. I just think it means that developers, if they want to play on that platform, have got to come through the App Store. And I understand that it does upset some people and that they don't like the commissions and things like that. But sorry, that's the way the game is played. And to be honest, I don't want external apps coming onto iOS and iPadOS devices, mainly because of the security issues. Now, obviously, Mac does a good job with it, but it's still not anywhere near as secure as iOS. People also want the missing apps from iOS to come over, so weather, calculator, health, watch, fitness, which all should be super easy for Apple to do. I kind of don't understand why they're not already there. Like, a weather app would be really good. It could almost be like a screensaver on your iPad while it's plugged in. Maybe that could be an option so that you can kind of get a weather report, or maybe we could have, like, when your iPad's plugged in and it becomes like a little kitchen hub, that it shows you weather reports, notifications on there, maybe some news headlines, that kind of thing. We could have it as a little bit more active when it's not in active use. And also persistent networking for background apps. So this is something that I wasn't aware of, but apparently about 30 seconds after you move an app into the background, it cuts off its network connection, which makes sense because I've had so many problems in the past of trying to upload something to, say, Dropbox, and if you come out of the app, then the upload pauses and you think it's done, and then you go back into the app and it's like 4 minutes remaining or something, and that's quite annoying. I can see that that would be a really helpful thing that maybe we could toggle on and off on a per app basis, because you might not want all of your apps to have that access to the network, but it's very useful for the ones that you need. So let me know what you think about these ideas for iPadOS 15. Let me know what you think about these concepts for iPadOS 15. There's also people asking for Terminal on it. I'm not sure what you would use Terminal for on this, unless you were doing like MySQL servers or something like that for web development, which might make sense, but I feel like there's a better way to do it than Terminal on an iPad, but I could be wrong. Let me know why in the comments. And we're going to get into some iCave answers.
Evan Rogers 8 hours ago asks, iCave answers, do you think the iMac and iPad Pro will have the highest and lowest binned M1 chips?
So it doesn't look like the iPad Pro is getting binned chips at all. They've got the full 8 GPUs and the full 8 CPU cores. There don't seem to be any issues like that. The iMac, we have been given one of the lower binned chips, the same as we have in the iPad Air, and I'm not sure that that was the original plan, but I have a feeling that maybe Apple's needed to do it because of this silicon shortage that apparently is actually affecting Apple more than I expected. So maybe they've had to use some of those lower bin chips in the iMacs in order to get the volume production that they needed, which is a little bit annoying, but I also don't think it's going to make any difference for the people that are buying a 2-port iMac. I don't think they are going to notice any real difference in graphics performance. So in terms of the binning, I'm not sure. It looks like the iMac's getting a few, but the MacBook Air is definitely the right place to be putting those.
Evan Rogers 14 hours ago edited asks, iCave answers, do you think Apple will stick with a single chip SoC for the M1X, or will they advance to MCM multi-chip module with GPU chiplets? The latter allows them to keep small die sizes and increase yield.
So there was a bit of conversation already in the comments section about this. They already use a kind of multi-chip module because the unified memory is on separate dies and then plugged into the kind of the top of the M1. Going to GPU chiplets, I think it probably does make sense, and it's what you said, increasing the yields. There might be new mainboards that have kind of 2 sockets or have a bigger socket for M1X. We don't know yet because we just haven't seen it. But the assumption is that they want to keep it as much as possible into a single SoC because that increases your performance in terms of the memory access and other things like that. The closer you can get everything together, the closer you can pack it all together, the faster it works. And as long as you've got the CPU and the GPU both accessing that same pool of memory, that's also increasing speed because you're not copying it between different memory pools.
RigSec 1 day ago asks, iCave answers, did Apple claim the M and M1 stood for Mac, Or is that just an assumption everyone makes? I wonder if Apple Silicon will be split between mobile, maxing at 8 cores, and desktop or pros starting at 12 or 16 cores.
So no, they've never said that the M in M1 means Mac. That is the assumption, but also people have assumed that maybe it means mobile. I'm not 100% convinced either way, but if they are going to stick with M for Mac, then that's why we all kind of assume that we get M1X and M1Z maybe. But if because the 1 refers to the generation of chips, so that means that you've got A14 level cores inside. M2 would have A15 level cores, and so on. So that should make a little bit of sense. And then we will put in the letter afterwards to denote what kind of, whether it was an extreme performance version or not. But it could well be that we have M1 for mobile computing, D1 for desktop computers, or something of an iMac level or a MacBook Pro level, and then P1 or M1 Pro for what goes into a Mac Pro style device. I think we'll find out a lot more about this at WWDC. It does kind of make sense that is probably when they're going to launch that next power version of the M1.
Machine Tool 17 hours ago asks, iCave answers, will we see M2/M2X MacBook Pro 14 inches and 16 inches by the end of 2021?
Okay, we're probably going to see the M2 chips by the end of 2021. I would expect they will come out in October or November, but M2X will probably be 6 months after that. I'm assuming that they were hoping to bring M1X out 6 months after the first M1s arrived, because a 6-monthly TikTok cycle makes the most sense to me. I don't think that Luke Miani is right when he says that they'll do a 2-year update for like M1 to M2. Just doesn't feel right, because they're using the A14 cores and they are going to have A15 cores. It's just a case of assembling them in a different SoC. So hopefully they will have kind of got all the efficiencies down with building the chips by then.
Andrew Hornback asks, iCave answers, what happens if we end up with an M2 chip that outperforms the M1X? If we posit that the MX chips will be for Pro models, and the non-X chips are for base models, that could get sticky from a product positioning perspective. Do you think the graphics capabilities, port selection, screen type, etc., on the Mac and possibly iPad models is going to be a major differentiator between Pro and non-Pro versions moving forward? I'd love to see that bit of product positioning strategy a little better defined.
So I don't think there's really any danger of M2 outperforming M1X. We're talking about going from A14 to A15 chips. The A14 chips, let's give them a performance of 1 just for simplicity's sake. M2's chips are going to have a performance of 1.2 to 1.25. So they're going to have a multiplier of about 20 to 25% up. The M1X, because you're going to have twice as many of the performance cores, is going to have somewhere between 80 and 100% more performance. So you're going to have like a 2 times the performance in M1X, whereas you're going to have 25% more performance in the M2. So I don't think there's any danger of that, but they're for very different markets. The M2 is going to be for your low-powered, as you said in your question. The MacBook Airs probably going forwards. I don't even think they'll put an M2 into MacBook Pro. I think MacBook Pro will be M1X exclusively. MacBook Air will be M1, M2. The iMac will probably span both, because you're going to have your consumer iMacs and your Pro iMacs. And then obviously you're going to have your Mac Pros for the absolute professionals, which I am still kind of torn between whether they're going to make a huge chip or if they're going to put like 2 or 4 M1Xs inside there and then find a way for those chips to communicate properly.
Tim Allen one day ago edited asks, iCave answers, hi Dave, hope you don't mind a general question. Do you have any strategies when you have to contact tech support to get a straight, correct answer back? I have tried both, showing my technical expertise and appearing completely clueless. Here lately neither seems to help elicit a sensible response. Often they don't even appear to read what I wrote. Do you have any success in this area?
So in all honesty, the only people that I tend to talk to at tech support is Apple. So I have been in contact with Apple support a few times. And to be honest, I'm always just myself with them. And I just kind of let them know that the kind of passion that I have for Apple stuff, because generally when I'm calling up, it's for something weird that they've never seen before. So for example, when I was trying to put Boot Camp onto my iMac, my 2013 iMac, they couldn't understand why there was any problems, and then I said, well, I am running my operating system on an external SSD because it's so much faster than the internal one. They were like, don't do that, it's not going to work, it's going to crash. I was like, I've been doing it for 2 years, it's fine. And they basically were able to work out the issue is that it needed to be on an internal drive, so it knew what to partition. So that was all fine. But the other stuff that I've been getting in touch with people for was like, I've got a 2007 MacBook Black Edition. I've just bought Lion. I've now just bought it from your website and I can't find a way to download it. So that's a bit of a difficulty for me. So they had to kind of do some workarounds and stuff. But to be fair, everyone's been really great, and just let them know that you're passionate, but also try and talk to a person rather than doing some sort of a live chat or like a support ticket if you possibly can, because being able to talk to a human, generally, you will get better results. So I hope that helps. If you've got any more questions, can I give one request for iCave Answers? Please keep your questions down to like a line or two, because some of these are like more than 30 seconds long when Siri reads them, and that kind of slows down the show a little bit. So if you can keep your question to a line or two, if you want to add some context in a second paragraph, let me know, but I won't include that in the question, but at least I'll have the context for what you're asking. Thank you so much. We will see you in the next show.